What's up, everybody? I'm out here in nature. This is going to be I don't even know where the camera is, but we're going to be very chill background. The background music's going to be nature today, as we're going to be talking about manhood and what it really is. What is this sovereign man thing you keep hearing about? Because I've been having conversations recently, and a lot of them are about actually deprogramming. Hear that beautiful wind in the background? It's actually deprogramming what many believe manhood to be. And so to even start this video off, I'd like to clarify that manhood is not some complicated thing. Manhood simply is a stage of development. So let's just get that out of the way first. Manhood is not special. Manhood, like childhood, is a stage of development. So if you have a baby, then you have toddler, then you have after a toddler, then you have a teenager, and then you have a man, or male, more accurately, an adult male. So just like how you have adulthood, you have childhood, adulthood. Manhood is simply adulthood for males. Nothing sexy about it. So when people talk about manhood and navigating manhood and manhood this and manhood that, they're not actually talking about manhood as a stage of development. What they're really talking about is something like how to do manhood right. That's more what they're saying. How can you go through this phase of development the right way? Because there's a wrong way and a right way to do everything. So this video will be about, I wouldn't say something as presumptuous as saying doing manhood the right way, as if I'm some 300,000-year-old male that's done it every generation. But I'd like to add and give clarity to what the function of the sovereign man is. So first and foremost, just like every stage of development, there are things that are expected of us. Let's put it that way. With each stage, when you go from baby to toddler, there's an expectation of nature from you to be able to walk. It's instinctual, right? Nobody gives the baby walking training manual, or maybe that exists. Shout outs to them. But and then language, right? If a baby is in an environment where the language is Spanish and English, they adopt both. So there's an expectation put upon a human being as a baby to be able to walk and speak, right? And then beyond that, there are expectations that nature will continue to have. But then there's another kind of expectation that most develop and then they confuse with nature, which is the expectation of other people, right? That's where things get tricky. Because as a baby, as a toddler, till about age 7, it's around when you develop your ability to think for yourself. Something we often don't think about is that our self-concept, or who we think of as ourselves, in the first couple of years are told to you, right? Somebody tells you what your name is going to be, and you're like this little baby, you're like, huh? But it's told to you who you're going to be. Your name is blank. And then other people say, you're this way, you're a good boy does this. And they place what's called, in hypnosis, suggestions on you. And then you take these suggestions in and you go, okay, I guess that is who I am. And so you develop what's called a persona before you develop what's called an ego or a self-image. And it's not until about, it varies, but let's say 6 or 7, that you develop, you could say, a conscious mind, a sense of self, where you start going, maybe I can tell me who I am. But the problem is, for the past 6-7 years, people have been telling you who you are. Your environment has been telling you who you are. So how does that relate to manhood? Well, similarly how nature has innate expectations of human beings have expectations of human beings. But sometimes the expectation human beings have of human beings conflict with nature. And so, as a young man grows and develops, his job is actually to never go out of alignment with nature. Right? You could go, well, why not go out of alignment with nature? Well, what is nature? Right? Nature is that which governs. You could put it this way. Nature is that which is above human control. So think of something that's natural. It's something that human beings can't control, and they can influence to some degree, like you can turn a tree into paper, but they can't control it. Or they can't make a tree. No human being can make life. No human being can make water. It's just there from wherever water comes from. And so when you think about what nature is that which has an original intention. Everything has an original intention. When you look at a tree does the same thing no matter where you go. How is this possible? How does a tree know what to do to be a tree? How does a bird know what to do to be a bird? How does a bird know to sing? And if human beings have an animal aspect to them, which is only a part of them, do you think that animal aspect has an original intent? But what's interesting is human beings, we talked about the animal, we talked about the social, human beings also have another nature that they're born with, which is, many call it a spiritual nature, many call it a consciousness, soul. But when a baby is born and you hold it, there's something looking back at us through its eyes that we don't really think about or talk about. But that baby is born with a certain essence or beingness or identity. And so we like to think of babies as these blank slates that come into the world identityless, and then we teach it who it is. But that's not true for anything else. Even your cats. Anybody who's had a pet knows they have different personalities. Did they learn those from human beings? Where did those personalities come from? Do all dogs act the same? So where does that sense of differentiation come from? And so when human beings are born, they have what's called an animal nature. That's what we talked about before. The original intent, where nature means the original intention of something. And then we have a spiritual identity. So what's the original intent of that which is looking out of the baby's eye? So when you think about this, and then you think about manhood, if nature has an expectation of you, an original intention, then what could the original intention of the male of the species of human beings be? Right? Because unless nature made a mistake, I feel like the modern back and forth, the red pilling and all these things have forgotten this, but unless you're saying you know more than nature and that which produced nature, then men and women need each other. So every angry, oh my goodness, fuck these bitches or fuck these niggas and fuck the men and blah blah, all that is unnatural by definition. Because if we were supposed to be apart, then why would nature produce two beings instead of one? So there is a natural, when those who violate nature die, right? That's what dis-ease means. It means bodies out of a state of natural alignment. Health is natural. Disease is unnatural. Similarly, a state where men and women are against each other is unnatural. And so as a man transitions into adulthood, called manhood, what could the expectations, taking society out of it, what could the natural expectations be? Do those exist, right? Well, we can say one of the natural expectations in some way is for the male to provide some sense of security for the female. How do we know this is the case? Because the male is born and physically stronger, bigger than the female. Nothing a woman can do can change that, right? And then we can say, what would be the fundamental original intent or design for the female? Well, there's something females can do that males can't, which is produce life. So there's a clue, but we'll save that for later. So going back to the original intention, what the hell is a manhood? If manhood is adulthood, then that means there's an original intent. That when a man develops, more is expected of him. So what is expected of him? And it's one thing. And that's why I actually decided to shoot this particular video in nature. As a man matures into manhood, adulthood, his original intent on a biological level is to develop into himself and develop that. We'll start with the spiritual first, because the internal gets reflected in the external. On a spiritual level, the male's expectation is to take what is within him, right? That starts with an inkling. That starts with a curiosity, with an interest. It's like, okay, I see this wilderness, right? The unknown. There's this unknown place, and in a male, there's a natural curiosity to it. Something that's not quite there with females. There's a natural curiosity. If you look at a little boy, he's always trying to, let me jump off that. What's that? There's a natural curiosity in the male to go into the unknown. If you think about sex, funnily enough, here's a parallel. Sex is literally going into the unknown, right? A vagina is a dark space that men do not know what's inside, but they feel this inclination to go inside it. Now, we don't really think about it like that, but if nature is giving you the blueprint, it's right there. Like a sperm has no brain in the way we think of it, yet it's swimming through this unknown dark space to get into this thing. It just knows I'm supposed to go into it. And so if we take that and we apply it to the male as he acts upon the world, the male intention is to go into the unknown, explore that curiosity, and establish, establish himself within the wilderness. If you think about what a home is, where the hell did all these things come from? Where did technology come from? Everything you can think of technologically was a combination of thought and nature. The imagination met nature. A house, imagination met nature. Nothing on a house didn't come from nature. No spoon, no computer. Everything came from the planet, nature, right? It's the merger of the masculine and the feminine. Mother Nature and the mind of man. Right? And so there's an inkling within a man to go into the unknown and conquer it. Now, conquer usually has a negative connotation, but in this case, I simply mean to establish and leave his mark or footprint. When we think of children, legacy, those are male tendencies. When a male leaves his seed in a woman, he's reproducing himself through the woman. Right? And so a male is constantly seeking to go in the wilderness, the unknown, to reproduce himself. So that's all manhood is. Manhood is a stage of development where a man discovers himself as he goes into the unknown. Now, where does sovereignty come into this? The sovereign man stuff, how is that natural, right? The channel, the business is about bringing a man back into his original sovereignty. Well, what does sovereignty mean? Sovereignty simply means the ability to govern oneself. Now, that seems self-evident. It's like, okay, I'm already sovereign. I'm already governing myself. Well, if that were the case, and we were truly sovereign as we, or most of us think we are, then procrastination would be impossible. So the question becomes, do you ever procrastinate? Is procrastination ever a thing? Do you ever see a beautiful woman and you're like, man, I want to go speak with her, I want to go, but you don't do it? Do you ever want to say something that's true, that's right, that's correct? And you go, well, I can't do it because, I might get fired. I might get canceled. Those are moments where you actually suppress your sovereignty. And so you become the opposite of a sovereign man, which is the suppressed man. And so there are moments where we dance in and out of sovereignty. However, for a man to fulfill, and that's critical, pay attention to that word fulfill, the thing all men are looking for, fulfillment. For a man to fulfill his mission, purpose, he needs to first come to know himself. Because he can't know what he's putting into the world without knowing who he is. So it's like, you hear that all the time, knowing who you are, all this shit. What does that actually mean? Well, let's look at it from this angle. For a man to know himself, he must know what he is not. For a man to know himself, he must know what he is not. How can a man know what he is not? A man knows what he is not by experiencing things that he dislikes. So how does he experience things he dislikes? By going into the wilderness and unknown and trying and experiencing and tasting and bumping his knee and getting back up. And it's the exploration of the unknown that a man learns himself. If you knew yourself immediately, there would be nothing to explore. There would be nothing to expand into, nothing to grow into. So if you think about why you're so extracted to going and seeing, like, okay, men do this in the modern day in like video games. You want to go in there and see if you can, get to that new rank. And what you're looking for is physical evidence that you're more than you think you are, or you're who you actually think you could be. But in that process, you are experiencing things you don't like. And in experiencing the things you don't like is where you find yourself. Because you're like, okay, it's not this, it's this, it's not this, it's maybe it's this, maybe it's this, maybe. And in that process of exploring life and going, okay, maybe, well, I thought this was a girl for me. Maybe this girl's for me. Maybe this girl's for me. Maybe this, or maybe this work, this passion, this. And then it's through that exploration, it's through that going into the wilderness that you find yourself. However, if a man lacks sovereignty, meaning if a man, because sovereignty truly is an internal game, what's inside of us? Flesh. No, I'm kidding. What's inside of us is thought and emotion. Two of the hardest things to govern. Thought and emotion are the most powerful things we have, and they're the hardest things to control. Right? Thought is like the wind. See? It just moves. You can't contain it. You're like, man, I'm trying to stop myself from thinking. Can't do it. And our emotions is like this river right here. I don't know if that's in the shot, but we'll put something right here if not. But it's like this river right here. Right? It's in there. Cool. It's always flowing, moving, can't be contained. So what people misunderstand is that the game is not to control your thought nor to control your emotion. That's impossible. That's like saying I'm going to capture some water in my hand. Like you can cup it and you can maybe keep it in there for a moment and you can, but the nature of water is to continue to flow. Cannot capture it. The nature of the air, thought, is to continue to move and sway and be. This nature is movement. There is no wind if it stays still. And there's no such thing as truly still water. It's always moving. Right? So if their nature is movement, then control is impossible. So what are we after when we say sovereignty or controlling the mind and emotion? It's not control of the mind of emotion, it's disallowing the mind and emotions from controlling you. See, many heard the sovereignty. Oh, I'm already sovereign. I'm sovereign as fuck. Right? But you can't get yourself to go to the gym regularly. You can't get yourself to eat what you said you're going to eat. So who's in control then? Mr. Sovereign? Right? And so I say that because we all encounter these moments where we violate our word and we're like, man, I said I was going to do that. And really what you're saying is like, I hope I do it in the morning. So if you're saying, I hope, you're like, I'm going to the gym tomorrow, or I'm going to do that thing today. I'm going to do this next year. What we're really doing is saying, I hope I follow through. So if you're hoping to follow through, who's in charge? Who are you begging for mercy from? Right? Who are you hoping has mercy on you and allows you to do the thing you said you were going to do? And so what I say that because all of us do it. I've done it a billion times. Every man, unless it's David Goggins. No, shout out to David Goggins. But every man experiences that internal turmoil of his mind constantly moving from one intention to the other, or his emotion moving from one intention or one desire to the next. But neither of those are who you are. That soul aspect that we spoke about in the beginning is who you are. And so that soul aspect has the ability, like the sun, to look at the air and the water below, but be none of it. It shines, it's a part of it. The light hits the water, the light hits the air, but it's neither. And so sovereignty truly is the ability to not get lost in the sauce, not get lost in the river and the wind. And right? And you're praying and begging for mercy from your emotions when you said you were going to go to the gym. You said you were going to do this. You said you were going to do that. And da-da-da-da-da-da. And you know when the time comes, you don't do it. And the only difference between the life you have now and the life you want is you doing what you said you're going to do. And I know most people watching this, just keeping it a buck, know that a lot of how their life is not how they'd prefer for it to be. And if the only difference is a person doing what they said they're going to do, unless you're literally in like North Korea or some shit like that, then what's going on here? Isn't this something that we should deal with? So as we realize that, we realize, oh shit, the game of sovereignty goes way deeper than I thought. It's true self-control. It is when the wilderness is doing its thing. You hear a lion in the distance about to come eat you back in the day, or you hear something moving in the bushes, or you don't know what's on the other side, right? There was no GPS. You're not GPSing yourself through nature. And so men historically had to go into the unknown repeatedly and contend and conquer it. And today, that aspect within men has been, it hasn't left men, because it's natural. You can't not have it. But it has been replaced and outsourced into the virtual world. So now that explorative, that sovereign instinct has gone into the virtual realm. And so instead of trying to conquer the wilderness, conquer real life, actually become and find ourselves and then leave that imprint, we have decided to go into a place where there are no consequences, the video game world, right? The internet. So that's where we seek to acquire sovereignty. We go into the social world. We now no longer show up as who we choose to be. We show up as who we believe people will accept. And so we find, or we attempt to find ourselves in other people. And what does that look like? That looks like deep in your core, you want to leave that damn job. Deep in your core, you want to be an artist. Deep in your core, you want to start that landscaping company. Deep in your core, you want to be a speaker. Deep in the core, you want to enact some kind of change. But then the first thought that comes to your mind is, what will people think? Right? Will they accept me? And so instead of finding yourself in the unknown, you try to find yourself in the known of the people around you. And so you become a good little surgeon. And shout outs to the surgeons. And you become a good little whatever the hell. Good little engineer. A good little computer scientist. And you hate work. And you come home. And because that sovereign impulse is still within you, it's still fighting, it's still pumping, it's saying, wake up. This is not what we're here for. Right? Because you know who you are in knowing who you're not. And so if you're knowing who you're not at your job, for example, we're going to use the job thing. If you're knowing who you're not and you stay there, then that's the true meaning of selling your soul. Right? That's the truest meaning. That's actually what it means. It means you sold out your soul. The thing within you is saying, this is not it. This relationship is not it. And so, as a man comes into his sovereignty, he must let go. You cannot remain sovereign and still be attached to the approval of others. You will be the suppressed man. And so we're in a generation of suppressed men who are too fearful to show up boldly, authentically, because they know themselves and the approval of others. And I was like that. I experienced that in so many areas. So I know it intimately. And so I had to break free from the false identity of the suppressed man and evolved into someone sovereign. And sovereignty is something that's ever evolving. Right? It's a psychological process. It's an internal game. And then there are higher levels to it. But the starting point is psychological. Your mind That's where the matrix conversation tends to come in. Right? You're in a cage where the walls are surrounded by the people who you know or who you imagine looking at you going, if you don't do what we want you to do, if you're not who we want you to be, if you don't have the political opinion we want you to have, if you don't see reality the way we want you to see it, there will be consequences. There will be consequences. And so you go, okay, well, shit, if there are going to be consequences, I'll be a good little boy. I don't want no problems. But what are the consequences in most cases? In most cases, the consequences are, we don't approve. We don't approve of you. And you go, oh my God, please approve of me, please. And where does that tendency come from? Well, what did we say in the beginning? We are born into this world where people tell you who you are first. And then you develop your identity after that. So you're actually born into reality going, or you're born into a reality of suppression. That's where the Bible comes from, the original sin term, or that expression is, you're born into a reality where you are told who you are. And since nobody can know your soul but you, they can never get it right. They can never get it right. Nobody who told you who you were could ever get it right. Only you can know who you are. And then that core gets bigger, gets realer, gets fuller as a man goes into the wilderness and explores. And that's manhood. Manhood is nothing special. Every male will hit manhood. It is a stage of development. But will a man become sovereign within manhood? And then sovereignty is a requirement for a man to truly become who he is, know who he is, and then leave that footprint everywhere he goes. Everywhere he goes, he leaves that footprint. But if you remain a suppressed man, suppressed around your wife, suppressed around your children, suppressed around your friends, suppressed at your job, you're just suppressed. The only place you can have a little bit of freedom is in the virtual world, when you're talking shit on Twitter, when you're talking shit in the comments. But that's cowardly. You're a coward. But we all go through it, and we all have the opportunity to go beyond it. But for any of that to happen, it's going to require courage. It's going to require what is always required, the most natural thing that every male that's ever been anything ever, and I don't even mean just social status, whatever your version of the soul, whatever your version of success looks like, whatever your soul craves, whatever intrigues you, whatever sparks your curiosity, as you go into the wilderness, the darkness, to explore and find yourself, you're supposed to go into the wilderness, find yourself, and bring it back. Bring yourself back. Bring yourself back, more expanded, more powerful. Bring it back to the village. Go into the wilderness, come back, and then bring the gems of who you are and share it with the rest of us. But if you never go into the wilderness, you're nothing but a burden, because we'll never find out what you could have been, who you should have been, had you just had the courage to take a little bit of a chance. And so manhood is courage, or you should say, what nature requires of us during manhood is courage. What nature requires of us in manhood is action. But unfortunately, we are in a generation of inactive men, of males, who are suppressed. And my objective with this is not to, I was on some social media platform, I think it might have been TikTok, and some woman said that the sovereign man sounded like a version of the new Man Up or something like that, which is interesting, because if a man isn't sovereign, if he has very poor control over governance over his emotion and thoughts, that's a very dangerous man. What that looks like is the male who, when he gets upset, nothing but volatility, nothing but chaos, right? Nothing but chaos. And so sovereignty is the most noble thing a man can obtain, because it's from that place that he can truly act with his original and genuine intention. Whereas the suppressed man is like a ticking time bomb. You know, when something is pressurized, when something's pressurized too long, eventually it pops, because nature always wins in the end. And the suppressed man is the unnatural man. It's the unnatural male. And that's why women don't respect him. That's why no one respects him. Right. And so there's so much we could say about the sovereign man, but we're going to end it here, the manhood conversation. So what are some practical things you can do? The first step, if you want to become more sovereign, is to cut off all distractions for a moment. And I do mean all. No phone. You can go in nature. You can stay in your room. But make sure you're to yourself. Many will fear this because then they'll be with themselves. And we know the demons and the thoughts, the emotions and thoughts that you're trying to run from, for most guys. And that's reasonable, right? A lot of content coming soon on how to govern, subdue, and really purify, right? Because it's not natural for you to be in that state of internal chaos. But bring us back to the natural man. Many complain. I was joking with my girl today, and many men complain about the modern woman and not understand that they're a modern man. And so a lot of the outcomes they're getting from these quote-unquote modern women is the reflection of them being the modern man. But they want a traditional woman or a natural woman. But they're an unnatural male who's suppressed, who's a coward, right? So that's where we're going to end it today. Sunlight's going away, so that's nature's cue for me to shut the fuck up. But if you enjoyed, do something about it. Do something. Don't be a bum. Be lazily like the video if this is a YouTube video. Leave a comment. Right? Speak. Wake up. No longer remain suppressed. But practical steps. Go into a space by yourself and ask yourself this question. If money wasn't an object and I knew I couldn't fail, and I knew if I accomplished or obtained this thing, people wouldn't praise me for it. If I would get no social approval whatsoever, but I could do anything I wanted, what would it be? Because a lot of times when people pick what they think they want, they're really asking themselves, what would give me the most status? What would impress people the most? What would get people to pat me on the back? And then they conflate that with their mission. They conflate that with what they truly desire, what their soul truly craves. But nothing your soul will ever crave will require the approval of someone else. So with that, I'm going to leave y'all and head back to this good old nature. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.